Welcome to the Same Day Podcast, where we discuss driving incremental business growth and other topics related to real estate, property management, and entrepreneurship. Now to the show at hand.
So I have Yoni Schmidt here, and super excited to have him here because he's a very knowledgeable real estate agent, investor, property manager. I mean, if it's in real estate, he's done it and he's doing it. Right? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what you do, basically what takes up your day?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me here, Alfredo.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. I've been trying to think about, when you and I met for the first time, and I wasn't really sure. Let me make sure that this
we did a transaction together, and we went and had coffee at Cirque, remember? Down on 6th Street down there.
I do remember.
What's that called now? The Pearl District?
The Pearl District.
That's right.
Great area to invest in Tulsa. Yeah. So I just sold a house on Pearl for an institutional investor out of Austin, 424 South Troost, and really interesting stuff that's happening around that area.
Yeah, that's actually something I'm really excited to ask you about for people listening in here is just what kind of opportunities are out there. Yoni's actually a really young guy that's already way into having a big time real estate portfolio, managing a big real estate portfolio for the company that he has. And so I'm excited to ask those kind of things.
Yeah. And I don't manage, any of the properties really, I guess maybe a few for myself, but, and I'm here and there coming in and out of the operation side. I'm more on the sales side.
Okay.
But to answer your question, Yoni Schmidt, born and raised in Jerusalem, Israel, served in the Israeli Defense Forces for the mandatory 3 years. I was in the old city of Jerusalem, had really inspiring and meaningful service in the IDF. And I moved here basically 2 days after I was honorably discharged. From there, moved to Florida after a little trip and didn't like what I was doing there in sales. So came to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where my grandfather was, and had some family here.
Yep.
Was working 3 jobs simultaneously. I think I was crunching about 80 hours a week, just trying to save up as much as I can. The real kind of goal was to save up as much as I could to meet my friends at the tip of Argentina in Ushuaia, and then travel for about a year, which is kind of what Israelis do after the army. And that didn't really pan out. I had an opportunity. It was like a now or never situation of, hey, you can go to school pretty much for free, and I just hopped on it.
What do you mean you could go to school for free because you served?
No, actually, because my grandfather's generosity was
gotcha.
Something that has been a constant theme in my life, and I'm super grateful for it.
Is your grandfather somebody that's like a mentor to you, or was a mentor?
In a sense, maybe even without even realizing. He owned real estate in Tulsa for a very long time. I still drive by those duplexes that he used to own right here on 61st between Yale and Sheridan.
Yeah.
And I always think about, oh man, I wish I should have bought those from my grandfather. But he did an owner finance on that and did pretty well.
So how'd you get into real estate here?
So I think I've always had a natural kind of curiosity with real estate. My father was, doing some stuff in real estate in Israel. He's actually a licensed real estate agent in Israel. So if anyone ever needs a place, give him a call. But he got me into real estate from a young age. I was very fortunate at the age of 17 to get my hands on my first property. Through the help of my father.
And you still own that property?
His attorney. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I do. Yeah. It's been great. It's downtown Jerusalem, Israel. And, ever since then, I've kind of always loved real estate. Didn't know that I'd end up in real estate. I always knew that I wanted to be a businessman. I just didn't know what.
Sure.
So went to OU, studied finance and international business, graduated, worked in private equity, and then segued into real estate. And then, from here to there, getting licensed, selling homes, buying homes, helping buyers and sellers, working for another very large, multifamily operator here in town, about 3,000 to 5,000 doors Maybe they're at 5,000
Wow.
now, but I think when I started, they were at 3,000.
They're at 5,000 doors now.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Mostly syndications, though. CEO has been, kind of doing syndications and taking GP positions and opening it up for LPs. Worked as the operations manager there for a while, also while selling real estate. And then I went to work for an individual who owns some real estate here in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, in Richmond and Roanoke, Virginia. Worked for him, managed an apartment complex at 4th and Elgin, the East End Village Apartments in Tulsa. That used to be, in 1928, the original Chevy dealership here in Tulsa.
Oh, wow.
And it was overhauled and converted into a large apartment complex, 83, kind of like modern industrial loft-style apartments.
Sure.
Yeah. That was like an $8 million project, turned into 13 because of some, GC issues, and basically, pretty interesting deal though.
Cool.
Really enjoyed my time at East End Village. Yeah.
So a while ago I said, you manage properties, or you said, no, I don't do that part of it. What did you mean by that?
So my responsibility, and when I started with, Keyrenter, which is the current company that I'm with, when I started with Keyrenter, I'd called up Matt Zulk and we were talking, and he had just launched his Oklahoma City operation. It was like the start of the pandemic. And I thought, oh my God, this guy's crazy, right? Like who's like expanding their business in times of such uncertainty?
Yeah.
And I was like, I called him up and I said, hey, is now really the time to like go after this new opportunity? He's like, yes, of course. Now is the time to be helping people. Exactly the time. And so I thought about it and I thought, okay, yeah, maybe that's true. And I knew Oklahoma City. I lived in Oklahoma City. So I said, why don't I go head up that shop? Because he was at like 2 doors there. Mm-hmm. And within 18 months, we scaled to about 600 doors.
Wow.
In the Oklahoma City market. And then Matt said, oh, cool, go do that in Northwest Arkansas. We came into Arkansas and learned some hard lessons that, the two markets are not similar in any way.
Yeah.
Northwest Arkansas is more of an accidental landlord type of market, whereas Oklahoma City is really ripe for investments, and people pursue it more intentionally, right?
Sure.
So Matt decided to acquire a business and merge it into Keyrenter. We grew that market through an acquisition, and now we've been growing organically, establishing our name, our reputation, the brand, building awareness. And then from there, we headed into Wichita. Cool. And so now today, my role is to head up the sales operations for Keyrenter Property Management, basically, PMC. That's the Keyrenter that operates 4 franchise markets: Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Northwest Arkansas, and Wichita. And I oversee 4 business development managers, 1 in each market, and a couple of sales associates who actually sell the assets that we then manage.
So needless to say, you have a lot of experience in that rental game, right? Like both giving value to the investor, but also taking care of the tenants, right? Like in order to be successful in your line of business, you guys got to be able to do both, right? And serve both. And I've always known you as someone that is interested in giving value first. As a matter of fact, we have a client right now that you're helping out, and you actually stand to make 0 commission on it. But I don't see any difference in your game. I don't see any difference in the value you provide to that person. I feel you're just as motivated. So what I want to ask, I'm leading to, and this is what the podcast was originally like. The information we want to get to everybody is what's the different motivation, and what's the difference to somebody knowing if they should be renting right now or if they should be buying, in your opinion, from your point of view? Mm-hmm. Because you guys get applicants all the time, and you must have a way to filter them, approve them, that kind of thing. So let's start at the rental process, and we'll graduate into buying. But I want to know, like, why would somebody go, I should rent right now, over I should buy? You're obviously not in the game of convincing people not to rent, right? But I also think you are in the game of educating people and doing what's best for them.
Yeah, and that's kind of the philosophy that I take with sales as well. is, when we go through the discovery call with new clients and new owners, and this is how it should also be with new tenants, right? Is we don't start with our services and our pricing. We actually just have to ask the questions to help them make the best decision for them, rather than look for an opportunity to benefit from it ourselves. That's overall our philosophy. It's like the go-giver, giver's gain type of philosophy, where it doesn't matter if you provide value with no expectation of anything in return in some way, shape, or form. I think that value will come back to you.
Sure.
Right. Asking a tenant, I guess, and can you repeat that question? I guess
I just want to know why somebody would be, they're at a crossroad. Should I buy? Should I rent?
Yeah.
Right. And they don't even know if they have the option to buy or rent it. They're just thinking like, what path should I take? In your opinion, what should they consider when renting? I mean, there's obviously situations where we're all in that renting for now should be better. Like let's wait. And there's situations why let's go ahead and purchase right now, especially in a market like Tulsa. What would you say what advice do you have for somebody at that crossroad, at that fork in the road?
Yeah, I think the first and most important question to ask them is, what are your goals, right? I mean, are your goals to become a homeowner? Do you understand the implications of being a homeowner and, what it takes, right? It's a lot of responsibility.
Sure.
There is a lot that can go wrong, and you have to be prepared for those things, right? Are you prepared for those things? How can you be prepared for those things? Those are the questions that I would ask someone who's at that fork in the road, saying, should I go rent or should I go buy, right? Are your goals to own real estate? If they are, then, my personal perspective is that everything is cheap in the rearview mirror, right? So it's almost like it could be that it's almost always the right time to buy, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that, you're going to get the best deal, but real estate tends to be very forgiving in the long term.
Sure.
And so acting on it, in that moment is probably the best thing that you can ever do for yourself, if that's your goal.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, what goes up must come down, not an economic principle, right? Like it's not something, if you look at the values of homes in the last 60 years, whatever, it's up and to the right. It just always has, and it always pretty much will be at some point. Now, will there be dips? Yes. Will we have 2008, 2009 where it dips? Maybe here recently in the last few years, depending on the market. But ultimately, it's always going to be trekking up, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, here in Tulsa, Oklahoma City, generally in the heartland, we are shielded from those extreme fluctuations that you experience on, like in New York or
Sure.
Miami or anywhere in Florida, anywhere on the West Coast. We are pretty shielded, even in 2007, 8, 9, right, during the financial crisis and the mortgage-backed security crisis. Tulsa, for example, was pretty steady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it just a stigma that somebody that's renting might not have the credit that somebody that's able to buy, or are you guys seeing pretty equal average credit scores when somebody's with your tenants that you see with a lot of the buyers that you help?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't see that many applications. From time to time, I do. I would say that regardless of your credit, there's likely a path forward. You just have to seek it, right?
Sure.
Because there are companies out there that can help you restore your credit. If you come to property management companies like us and you say, okay, my plan is to buy something, within a year or two, and I'm saving up and I want to rebuild my credit, and it's going to take a little bit of time. One of the things that we do at Keyrenter is we report to the credit bureaus that, you've paid your rent. So that actually helps you boost your credit score so that you do have a pathway to buying.
So you guys are consciously helping people get into better positions, even though it may cost you a tenant.
Definitely. I mean, I think that kind
Why?
of comes down to like the heart of what we do, right? We want to provide quality housing for quality people, right? That's the ultimate goal is to have good products, good assets, good services, and help people just improve their life in general.
And I'm obviously biased on this because I'm a lender, but I truly believe, and I believe it whether I'd be a lender or not, in the state of Oklahoma, with the prices that we have and our tax structure the way we have it, I think everyone that's going to plan on being here 3 years or more should always have a game plan on how to purchase a home. Because property taxes are low, okay? Prices are not bad compared to the rest of the nation, right? We charge a state tax instead of a property tax. So I think that you're always going to be better off spending your money on buying over renting for those reasons.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean? And so like everyone should have some sort of game plan on how they're going to get there. You may be a year out, you may be 2 years out. It doesn't really matter, but you have to be aware of it and you have to be working on that game plan so that when it does come time and you are in the market, you get the best terms possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think homeownership is a vehicle. It's a great vehicle to build wealth, and it's a great vehicle to achieve financial freedom.
Yep. So in the name of helping some of maybe your tenants or any tenants out there renting, I'd like to just a little bit go over some things you can be working on right now. First of all, like we just talked about, is credit, right? With credit, you want to pay something over time on time. And you don't necessarily need a lot of credit. I think there's a misconception out there that people just go out there and go crazy getting credit cards and cars and all that kind of deal, right? Mm-hmm. You really only need 2 or 3 credit cards. And honestly, the lower you can keep your debt, the better. Mm-hmm. I would say that don't pay things off completely if you're trying to build credit. I know that sounds like counterintuitive, but you want to keep a very small balance on your credit cards. You want to keep a small balance on everything. Avoid the large ticket items like cars, like installment loans like cars and furniture and things like that, and stick with the revolving credit. Keep it super low, and anybody can raise their credit. I would definitely attack judgments or any kind of public record type of debt that you have.
Yeah.
I would take care of those. I wouldn't necessarily start paying off collections till you talk to someone like me. Mm-hmm. Right? Because when you start paying off collections, it actually activates and brings them active again. And sometimes it hurts your credit. So I would definitely talk to someone that knows what they're doing when they're looking at your credit.
Yeah.
On that.
With collections too, I know that you definitely want to negotiate with them to make sure that you're paying it off to delete it, not necessarily just wipe out the balance.
That's a great point. If they're willing to delete it off your credit, that's the holy grail of paying a collection off. Now, I will say this, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
A lot of them just won't do that part of it. If you tell them specifically, like I know I have a friend actually who's part of Tulsa Adjustment Bureau, and he tells me if we will tell them that it's for a mortgage to buy a home, they actually do work on deleting it for you.
Yeah.
So if you let them know that it's for a home, a lot of times you get a little more lenience on that. But deletion is the number one. Number 2, like Yoni was saying, if you can negotiate it down, you owe $5,000, you can say, hey, I got $3,000.
Yeah.
If you'll take $3,000 right now, I'll pay it all right now. But again, on those collections, I would totally wait till you talk to somebody that knows what they're looking at a credit. We have tools and calculators and all kinds of stuff that let us know how to improve your credit. Mm-hmm. Cool.
And when you say keep that debt low, right, you're talking about your utilization ratio of how much you're utilizing from your credit. What's the most ideal percentage ratio that you would see?
People used to always talk about 30%, but it's the lower the better. If you can get it every I would say there's a threshold every 5%. Mm-hmm. So if you can get your utilization under 5%, that's the best, right? So for simple math, if you have a credit card with a $1,000 limit, you want to keep it under $50, right? When I play around with that calculator, sometimes I drop it down to $10 on a $5,000 debt, and it kicks it up. So those algorithms for the credit bureaus are kind of funky, and so you never know exactly where the thresholds are. But it could be that it wants these 2 credit cards low and this one at 0.
Yeah.
I will say a lot of people are under the assumption that just paying everything off is the best case. And what's weird is when I run those simulators and I pay everything off, their credit will drop sometimes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yep. Authorized user accounts are also a great way to build your credit. They're also a great way for your credit to be dragged down because the card you're on is not healthy. Didn't get paid on time or the balance is super high.
Yep.
So I definitely look into that if you don't have a ton of credit, to find a family member, somebody that's willing to add you an authorized user account.
Yep.
But again, these are things that it's important you don't wait till you're like, oh, hey, I think we want to buy a house this month. I think, like I said, everybody should have a game plan that they're working on to increase their buying power as much as possible, because you should and could want to buy a house, but there's also a lot of other great things you can do with credit. Overall, things are going to cost you less if you have good credit.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
And income, we usually take 2 years work history, and we take the 2-year averages of your overtime, bonuses, anything that's not your regular pay. I would say right now in the marketplace, there is a big emphasis on your average hours that you're working. So many people think they're full-time, but in the underwriter's eyes right now, if you're not averaging full-time, you're not full-time, you're variable income.
Interesting.
So if you're preparing yourself to buy a home in the near future, 6 months, 2 months, 2 years, just be aware of that. How many hours you're working a week matters. Now, this doesn't count PTO and vacation hours. I mean, if you're getting paid for them, that's good. So how many hours are you getting paid per week on average matters right now a lot. It didn't matter as much before. We could get explanations as to why they were low. But right now, that they're really, underwriters are really scrutinizing when somebody's not averaging the hours they say they work.
Yeah. So what could someone do if they're not averaging, that full time in the underwriter's view?
Well, looking at it statically, like right now, when you say what can they do you mean like what can they do moving forward so that they're not in that position in the future, or what can they do right now?
Yeah, what can they do right now? Could they pick up something on like the gig economy, right, where they're Ubering and door dashing or something like that, and the underwriters would view that as additional hours of work where they're benefiting from some income, or would that not necessarily be something that they?
Unfortunately, that's a good question, because a lot of people, we get that question in applications all the time. More and more and more people have side gigs.
Yeah.
Whether it's a little Uber
right
here or Amazon or something like that. Any income where you're being paid contracted, 1099, anything like that, you would need to have it 2 years.
Yeah.
And if it's your second job, you have to have it at the same time as your job simultaneously for 2 years. In other words, you got to prove that you can hold these two jobs for 2 years. So that wouldn't really help. What could help in the now is us finding a good reason why your year-to-date is low. Like, say, for example, you had a baby, right? And you were out on maternity for a month and a half, and we get to deduct that from your year-to-date and be able to use a new average.
Yeah.
That could do it, like if we find a good reason. But
that's interesting. So life events come into consideration when the underwriters are looking at that.
Sure.
Even if you were sick and you had some medical bills or stuff like that, or is that?
It's possible, right? Yeah. Like you can't just be like, I decided to travel for a month and a half, right?
Sure.
Having a baby is a significant event that you really can't do much about. So that would probably be one that we could. They'd want, we can't get too deep on what proof I can get on it, but I can get the verification of employment from the employer saying out on maternity leave. That doesn't violate, privacy or HIPAA or whatever it might violate there. So yeah, definitely. If the employer is willing to vouch for you that you were out for legitimate reason, then you can use that.
Yeah.
And as far as income, self-employed, we get a ton of stuff for that right now. Unfortunately, with self-employed, it's like 2 years tax returns.
Right.
We have to have average of 2 years income. So be careful on your only goal of doing your taxes to be to not pay taxes.
Yeah.
We get that a ton. We get taxes and they wrote off way more than they should have or could have or whatever it is. Their tax preparer wants to look like a rock star by not having to pay any taxes, and they come in here and their buying power is completely gone. So I'd say be real careful about that. I always hate to see it when somebody owns a business. They started their own business, they own their own business, and I really think they're shooting themselves in the foot when they do it to that level, because now they've not only lost their buying power with buying personal things, but how's their business going to go out and take out a business loan, a warehouse they want to buy, a equipment they need, any material they need? And so I think it's important to not be so single track that, hey, I just don't want to pay taxes. Besides that, on income, if you have any questions, obviously let us know. Assets, we want the money in your account for at least 60 days, but you can get a gift from a family member. Again, all these, we're talking about this just so that you can start preparing. I mean, this is for all those people out there renting. There's a lot of great programs right now for first-time home buyers. There's down payment assistance. There's incentives if you're a first-time home buyer and make under a certain amount. There's incentives if you're buying in certain areas and you're a first-time home buyer. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And, two things that I can think of right off the top of my head is finding a property management company that will report your rent payments.
That's huge.
Credit bureaus, so
that's
that
huge.
You can actually increase your credit. And then also finding a rock star real estate agent that can help you negotiate.
That's right. I know a good one.
The best terms and the best price.
I know a good one. What advice would you have for renters right now from your side of the ball?
I think from my side of the ball, I'd say that, closing costs is something that we're seeing coming back right now, right? A lot of buyers are asking for closing costs, especially those first-time home buyers on certain loan products like FHA, VA. Taking some of that closing costs and buying down the rate is probably something that would benefit any buyer, first-time home buyer, especially if they're, looking to hold on to this asset for a long term.
Sure.
I think buying down the interest rate, of course, as long as you're willing to stay there for at least the break-even period, then it's a smart thing to do. You'd be saving thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars on your interest payments. And, I know lenders like you probably don't love that, but
buying down the rate,
or the investors at least that are issuing the notes, I would imagine that they prefer you don't. But
It's actually probably the opposite right now, just because the reason is that it's a very high likelihood that the higher the rate is, the more likely they are to refinance in the future.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So if anything, lenders are kind of promoting right now, and the pricing is set up this way that you would want to buy some points so that you have a lower interest rate, but then also there's less likely, because if you right now you close on an 8.5% interest rate because you didn't buy any points, or 8 or whatever it is, as soon as rates go down to 7, you're refinancing. But if you bought it down to 7.3 and they go down to 7,
right,
you're probably not refinancing.
Right.
So I think right now everything's geared towards paying some points. It's crazy. There was a time not even that long ago that there's no way people would pay points. They're like, I'm not paying any points, right?
Right.
And now I haven't seen a deal in a long time where people didn't pay for points.
Yeah.
So that the market is just compressing so much that's what's available. That's the best available right now.
Yeah, and I think it's a smart move, especially because it can make your monthly payment a little bit more affordable.
Yep.
Right. Another piece of advice is, I guess, a product that you were mentioning to me maybe about a year or two ago, which is you could probably explain a little bit better than me, but it's the 1-2 buy down.
Yeah, so we have a 3-2-1 buy down, a 2-1 buy down, and a 1-0 buy down. That's a great product because what you're doing is you're negotiating that the seller basically pay a portion of your payment for the next 3, 2, or 1 years.
Yeah.
Right. And what's nice, and then after those 3 years, it goes back up to whatever the original rate was, right? But on that 3-2-1, I mean, that one's really cool. It goes down 3 percentage points essentially the first year.
Yeah.
And a lot of sellers right now are motivated to do that because the market's not moving as much, right? So, I mean, that's another thing I want to urge people out there, tenants, whoever's in the market. I keep hearing this like, well, Alfredo, rates are high right now. I want to wait, right? And man, right now is when the market is the softest as far as you going and getting the best rate you can.
Yeah.
As Yoni, tell me this: rates dropped to 5% in March, like everybody's crossing their fingers. What happens to the market?
Wow. I mean, it'll really stimulate the economy in a way that, may not necessarily be the greatest, because we already know that asset prices are a little bit inflated.
What's going to happen to the prices of real estate, though?
They'll shoot up.
It's going to be nuts.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm telling you, like, it's going to be multiple offers, over ask price, over appraised value. Like, there for a little bit, we didn't see it here in Oklahoma, but I do some lending in Texas and other states. like people were paying significantly above appraised value, not just over list price. Houses were appraising $30,000-$40,000 low, and the sellers were like, take it or leave it, and people were paying it.
Yeah,
Gladly. They as a matter of fact, there's sellers in markets, and it started to be that here, they would not accept an offer unless you waive the appraisal contingency.
Oh, I saw that. 2021, 2022 were two very bizarre years in real estate.
That's nuts.
In the 7-8 years that I've been doing it here in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting. But we are seeing some of those investors and home buyers who bought in 2021 already turning around and trying to sell their assets. And they probably can't make what they need to cover whatever it is that they put into it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, when's the last time you saw? It's getting tougher in this market, because when's the last time you saw somebody post their Robinhood screenshot of how much money they're making on I haven't seen those in a while.
I haven't seen those.
2021, everybody was doing it, and that's the same thing with real estate. Everybody was a pretty self-proclaimed expert in real estate, because honestly, you couldn't throw a rock and hit a house that wasn't going to make you some money, because everything was appreciating.
Right.
So everybody just all of a sudden thought they were these experts, because you literally anything you bought and even put some money into it, it was going to be worth that much more in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's not happening right now.
No, it isn't. I mean, and again,
a lot of people are unloading properties right now. You're seeing.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing some, not a lot. I mean, the inventory levels are pretty stable, I would say, but there's probably 2.5 months worth of inventory. I mean, would you agree?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But we are seeing some of those buyers who were in the market in 2021, 2022, last year, 12 months ago, trying to sell their assets for prices that they're not going to get.
Right.
Right. And so now it's a question of, how can they incentivize buyers, right? I saw one seller in Wichita, for example, offer a 3.25 assumable loan. And, I was very surprised that this house that was on the market for a very long time just wasn't moving. And the reason probably is because it's at such a high price that it's not worth it, even at a 3.25 assumable loan.
Well, and that's what I tell a lot of the people when they're talking about rate. I'm like, would you rather buy a house? And this isn't a question that's like one of those obvious ones, like, well, duh. But it's a question to ask. Would you rather buy a house with a high rate or a high price? Right. And well, to me, just to kind of jump to the punchline here is like a high rate I can work with. Once you pay the high price, that money's gone.
Right.
Right. So if you buy a house right now where rates are a little higher, but prices are softer, you can fix that later down the road by accelerating your payment, by refinancing, by all kinds of stuff, right? But a high price right now, like, so if these rates come down to that 5 that I talked to you about, let's just say they do, and I hope to God they do. But if they do, I mean, it's going to be a madhouse.
I agree.
Right, and I think it's going to be really tough to buy, and you're going to be that same 250 house that you're looking to buy right now is going to be 280, 290, easily.
Yeah. What would you say to someone though that when you ask them what would you rather buy at a high rate or at a high rate price. At a high price, when they say in response, well, at a lower rate I could afford more house?
We don't have low rates. You know what I'm saying? He could afford more. So in that same example is if he says, well, Alfredo, if rates come down, I can afford more house. But the thing is like, I could show him the payments on it. And let's say it is that 250 house right now at rates today for $30,000 more dollars, even with that lower rate, his payment's still going to be higher. That's what I would probably show him.
Yeah.
Right. I think people are still too, they have some like regret that maybe they didn't buy in that 4% market or 3% market. And so they think that's going to come back. It's just, I don't believe it will. I can't guarantee that, but I just don't believe 4% rates are coming back.
I mean, it's going to be a while for sure.
I don't, it'll be tough.
Yeah.
Right. And not while I'm in the business, I would think, but you never know. I just don't see them coming down that far, but they could.
Yeah.
But I would probably sit down with them and compare what we think that payment would be if it's $30,000 more. But then I could go over buy downs. I can go rate buy downs. I can go all kinds of stuff with them.
Yeah. And so who are you seeing right now in the market buying houses, and who is the market positioned for best to go after, a home?
Man, that's a really, really good question. It is first-time home buyers.
First-time home buyers.
Yeah, the reason it's first-time home buyers is because put yourself in the shoes of a homeowner right now. I think I saw something earlier today that over 50% of current homeowners have a rate at like 4% or under, right? So imagine you have a 3.5 or a 3.2% rate, which I think you do.
A 3.1. Thanks to you for locking it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You have a 3.1% interest rate. Yep. So now you're going into the market. You have to sell your home at 3.1 and then go get a rate right now at 7.5. Mm-hmm. So you might have to downsize to keep the same payment. Right. So nobody wants to sell right now. And so anybody that's not a first-time home buyer is staying where they're at. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a ton of first-time home buyers, and we're seeing incentives for first-time home buyers. I'm seeing a lot of interest in the new construction thing because that's where the inventory is right now.
Yeah.
So that's what we're seeing the most of right now, first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
Which is tenants, right? Which is people renting right now. Most tenants are probably haven't bought a home before.
Right.
So I think that it's a great market for them right now.
Yeah. So you mentioned builders, right? You work with builders, I'm guessing.
I do.
Builders, they have a lot of inventory. They, or I don't know if a lot of inventory, but some of them have some inventory that they're kind of left with from, I guess 2022, right?
Yeah.
And it's been a little bit tougher to move that inventory because of the higher interest rates. Are builders offering anything for first-time home buyers or any buyers in general in terms of, better terms, better closing costs, better interest rates? What are the builders that you're working with doing now?
Man, it's all over the board. I'm seeing incentives up to $40,000 to buy homes from a builder. So they'll use $40,000. You can use it as a price reduction. You can use it to buy closing costs. You can use it to buy points. Wow. So we are able to buy people's points down to 5.99 or whatever that might be. So I think that's a great market to do that in. You typically don't find that in the used market because the homes won't appraise. Mm-hmm. But they know what their homes will appraise for. They know what they'll sell for, right? And of course, even though there's a lot of demand for new construction, because used inventory's down, they still feel the pressure of needing to get that inventory off their books, mm-hmm. right? So they're motivated to get those houses off, and they're going to give you every reason possible to do it. So yeah, we're an approved lender with a couple of builders in town, and they're definitely giving $30,000-$40,000 in incentives right now.
Yeah.
So it's pretty neat.
And are those incentives only for first-time home buyers, or is it just for anyone who would walk off the street could also buy it?
Yep. I mean, anybody that qualifies for their loans or has the money to buy them, they can do it.
Yeah.
That's right. It's not just for first-time home buyers.
So you're saying anyone who's a renter who, is looking to buy something, anyone who's, buying their second house maybe, and they want to turn one into an investment property, an investor even could walk in off the street, and as long as they qualify, they'd get up to $40,000.
That's right. Depending on the price.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. I think, I've seen, obviously the higher the price, the more the incentive, but I think over the 400,000 might be the threshold.
Yeah. And they'd be buying a brand new house.
Brand new house. And what's nice about brand new houses, new construction, that I really love especially for first time home buyers, but for everyone, is number one, your utilities are going to be super low. Mm-hmm. Okay. Utilities are going to be down because your house is insulated well. Mm-hmm. You're not having to use a lot of gas or a lot of electricity to keep your house warm and cool.
New efficient systems.
Oh yeah, totally. You're going to have a warranty. Something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. Obviously when you go from being a tenant to owning your home, you don't get to call somebody and say, my water heater's broken.
Yep.
That's on you.
Right.
And so new construction, for the first year, you do get to call somebody and say, hey, the water heater broke. Right. And so that's a huge plus. Insurance is less costly. Mm-hmm. Homeowner's insurance is less costly on new construction.
Oh yeah.
So that's a big deal as well too.
Yeah.
There's several reasons you actually end up qualifying for more house when you're buying new construction than when you're buying used because of the insurance piece, right? Mm-hmm. Mainly, but also budget wise, I'd go through budgets with clients all the time. Budget wise, you're able to qualify for more afford more because your utilities are going to be lower.
Right. And so if we're talking a little bit about budget, Right. One of the things I guess that is important for anyone who's a first-time home buyer is to have a budget in the first place, right? Understand how much money you're bringing in every month, how much money it's going to cost you to own that home, to maintain that home, for your utilities, for escrowing for your insurance and your property taxes, right? And we know property taxes and insurance could be moving targets, right? Especially if you're buying a new build, right? The first year, it may have been that land was developed and the taxes were very low. And then once you're coming into that second year, right, you don't want to be surprised by that tax bill that's just going to show up and it's going to be substantially more, right?
Yeah, it's funny when I have clients and I always kind of know which ones the budgeters and which ones aren't, because I'll ask, is there a price or payment you're looking to be at? Mm-hmm. And the budgeters always go to payment, right? Like I have to be at this payment. And that's a smart thing to do because, at the end of the day, that's what you have to live with for that long. I mean, we get enamored with a certain house and that price. And so you want to make it happen at all costs. But until you sit down and do a budget and understand if you can afford it or not, you don't really know what you're getting into, right? And you may not own that home for very long, right, if you don't understand how that payment fits into your budget. So that's one of the first things I like to do with clients anyways, is just go over their budget and go as far as to do a budget with them, right? But definitely make sure they understand where their budget is, because that's the most important piece of it. Yeah.
And owning it for long, which is my favorite part, I would say. Long-term real estate investments, buy and hold, right? What would you say that is kind of like the most important thing for home buyers who are looking to not just like buy their first home or invest in a piece of property, but also build themselves a little portfolio of real estate investments?
I think it's always a function of like where you're at in your story. Meaning, like if you're a young family or young person, unmarried, no kids right now, I mean, I would be doing the buying my primary, putting minimum down, living in it for 6 to 12 months, renting it, buying my next one, as long as I can get away with it. If I could, that's the same advice I'm going to give my own son, and that's the advice I would give my 20-year-old self, is do that. I didn't do it that way because I didn't know, right? Yeah. But that's what I would probably do as much as often as I could do it, because I do think, again, not every city and not every market, not every is going to work this way. There are markets where the house prices are just too high, right, and your return on your rent, I mean, it's just not high enough. You can't get enough for it to cash. You have to be able to cash flow. Yeah. But you can cash flow here if you get to certain loan to values and you can get your payment down, right? You know that better than anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think those other markets that you're mentioning, right, the tax bill at the end of the year and the insurance costs it's
too much.
It's too much, and your expenses just don't or your income from your home, from the investment, doesn't keep up with the tax bill and the insurance bill at the end of the year.
Well, and forget even the investment piece of it. Like there's market, like, I'm licensed in California and I've done a loan up there for somebody in San Francisco, right? And the house prices are so high there that from a building wealth standpoint, you're better off renting and just saving your money.
Or investing it here.
Right. That's right. Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, you're actually better off like buying a home. There's more like a luxury item than it is any kind of like trying to convince anybody that it's like is a wealth building deal. I truly believe now, it's not like the super aggressive wealth buying your own home. I mean, like a personal, it's not like this super aggressive wealth building, but it is a wealth building tool here in Oklahoma.
Definitely.
Because of the prices of the homes.
Yeah.
And the affordability.
And so for, renters who are looking to buy their first home, for example.
Yeah.
Right. We talking about holding the property long term.
Yes.
Right. They have their kind of like their two buckets of like their needs and their wants. Mm-hmm. Right. And people a lot of the time they focus on the wants. Right. I want to have a 5th bedroom or a 4th bedroom or a playroom or a pool or a sauna or whatever it is that you're looking to have in your property. Right.
Yeah.
How do you help buyers reconcile, the needs and the wants and, buy their first property, because it's such an emotional process for people who are going through it for the very first time?
It's very rare that a person's first home's their dream home. And the faster they understand that, the better, that's a means to an end. It's a stepping stone to get to their dream home. The easier it is for them to process this season, right? Meaning like, when you buy this home, you're going to put money down, you're going to live in it, you're going to build equity. That equity is going to help you graduate to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one, till you get to that perfect house that you're going to have. If you can understand that at first, that helps you out so much, because you're right. People are either going to have such high expectations that are going to be beyond their affordability, that they're never going to be able to make that first move, that first step, right? Or they're going to get themselves into a situation they shouldn't be in. Right. So you have to understand that first house more than likely is not the home.
Right. So sacrifices in the present will yield, greater outcomes in the future.
Well, you're already sacrificing. You're renting, right?
You are.
It's just a little less of a sacrifice, and then a little less, until one day you go, all right, this is it. I'm sitting on my front porch drinking my coffee, looking at the sunset. All right, this is the one.
And sometimes you just have to start off renting. Right. I mean, you have to start off with something that you can afford. And, I was a renter in college. I was a renter, for a little bit, I guess, not really after college, but thankfully I had some family that let me stay with them. But, you have to make those sacrifices and maybe be a renter for a little bit, save up your money, and,
absolutely
spring into it.
You have to rent, but don't make assumptions about if you can or can't buy without advice, professional advice. Don't make assumptions about that. I mean, to tell some success stories kind of here to end. I mean, I've had plenty of people that call me to go over how they're going to get to that 20% down and how they're going to get their credit way up. And I look at their situation and get ready to give them advice. And I look at them and I say, what if I told you could go buy this weekend?
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, what are you talking about?
How happy does that make them?
It's funny. It makes them some people even get nervous, right? Yeah. Because it's like, what? Yeah. What happened here? I was not expecting that. So, but yeah, I mean, it makes them ecstatic. Like they can go out there and look and so I think that you definitely have to rent. You definitely have to make sacrifices, but in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you're at, right? If you called me and asked me on the phone for directions for Dallas, my first question would be what? Where are you at?
Where are you?
Yeah, where are you? And I'll tell you how to get there. And so that's the big thing with renters right now. That's the last thing I'll leave. This is the biggest advice is like you have to take stock. You have to find out exactly where you're at right now so that you can look ahead and go, okay, I'm going to rent for another year, another 2 years, which is going to put me in the position to take that next step so that eventually I get to the place where I want to be.
Yeah. But call the experts.
That's right.
Alfredo Madrid right here so that he can help you with your credit, with, your plan for saving, your budget, your
That's right.
Pathway to home ownership.
And then that's when I get you over to Yoni, which is the fun part, which is the going and looking at the house. I mean, that's what people love to do is go and imagine themselves in their families in these houses. And that's why they cry at closing tables. And that's why, this job is so satisfying, is because there is this really neat end of the rainbow that we get to, go on the journey with these clients.
Definitely. I think, we're in an industry of putting roofs over people's heads, and it's a pretty important one.
It is. Any last pieces of advice for tenants or home buyers out there or in general?
Just look for the resources. Don't just, sit around, try to research everything yourself. If you have questions, there are resources out there, people that you can ask questions, and people who have gone through this time and time again, and they're there to help. So
awesome.
Give us a call.
All right. Well, I appreciate you, Yoni.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it
so much. I appreciate it, Alfredo.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Same Day Podcast. Tune in to a new show each week and be sure to subscribe to get future episodes.